Welcome to the next installment of the Miami Group Sierra Club Virtual Backpack Series. Before we get started, a quick introduction for those who maybe your first time with one of our webinars. My name is Barry Randall. I'm the outings chair for the Miami Group Outings Group, and so we plan a lot of various types of outings. I'm joined tonight by Becky Van Damme, who is going to be monitoring the chat and helping out, hopefully admitting the latecomers. So Becky, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Becky Van Damme.
Okay, good enough. She's our birding expert from, was it 2 weeks ago that you did the birding?
Birds, yeah, intro to birding, yes.
Yeah, hopefully everyone caught that. That's a great presentation. Okay, so tonight we'll be taking another virtual deep dive on one of our favorite backpacking destinations. Actually, just favorite destination in general, because there's a whole lot of things you can do there, and that's Big South Fork. Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area. Our hope is that we can give you enough information that you'll feel comfortable exploring this area, planning your own trip down there, actually. Of course, if you're not comfortable planning your own trip, then you're certainly always welcome to join the next Miami Group outing that takes place down there. Hopefully later in the summer or even the fall, we'll get down there again. And if you're already familiar with Big South Fork, and I'm guessing some of you may be, we encourage you to jump on the chat, add your comments, add your experiences. If people are asking questions, then feel free to jump in and answer them, because it's a huge and varied area, and so I'm sure that other people on this call have some experience there as well. So let's get started on the topic of the evening, which is Big South Fork National River and Recreation Area. A couple of comments about Leave No Trace. Just that one of the things we love about Big South Fork is that it's relatively pristine. But it's getting more popular, and it's at risk of becoming one of these areas that's just loved to death. So we do want to refresh everybody on Leave No Trace. I always feel like I'm preaching to the choir when I talk to a group like this about Leave No Trace, because my guess is that you're the folks that are pretty conscientious when you're out there. But we do sort of think of you as our ambassadors, right? It's part of the if you see something, say something mindset, right? That all of us can help by pointing out when others are maybe leaving food out that would be detrimental to the wildlife, or even littering. And all of us, of course, can help leave the area in better shape than we found it. So just encourage you to do that, and just keep the Leave No Trace principles in mind. So, Big South Fork, 125,000 acres of the Cumberland Plateau. And it protects the Big South Fork of the Cumberland River and its tributaries. It's free flowing, so there aren't dams. There's no water release, which actually we'll talk a little bit more when we cover some of the trips down there. And it's just got miles and miles of beautiful gorges, sandstone bluffs. It has a lot of natural features. It has a lot of historic features too. It's really not that old of a national, it's not a national park, but a national river and recreation area. And so a lot of the old homesteads and cemeteries and those kinds of things are still down there, because there were people living in this area that were basically evacuated, booted out when it became a park. So it does have a lot of pretty cool historic features as well, and just a wide range of recreational activities that it supports. I like it because it definitely has a wow factor. It's got some really beautiful scenery, particularly for the Midwest. Again, for those of you familiar with Red River Gorge, think about it as just a bigger Red River Gorge. But some really beautiful scenery, which I like because when you're taking out people, particularly beginners, beginning backpackers, that sort of thing, as much as I love the opportunities in Ohio to do some backpacking and those things, they tend to not have the wow factor, right? They tend to be kind of a nice walk in the woods, which is nice, but sometimes you get people just starting out and they kind of wonder what's the big deal? Why would I get excited about, backpacking when, it's really just a walk through the woods. This area gives you some, dramatic overlooks, beautiful arches, rock houses, just some cool stuff like that. Okay. So we're going to start off with a quick poll just to see what you think the types of recreations that might be down there, recreation opportunities. Becky, can you launch that poll?
Okay.
All right. And this is anonymous, so just go out there and you check all of these that you think might be applicable to the Big South Fork. Okay, got a lot of responses. I actually can see this, Becky. I previous times, I don't remember being able to see it when I was sharing my screen, but that's good. Okay, we got a few people left. Okay, one or two left. Okay, I think we can wrap it up, Becky, if you want to end it and see what we got.
Share the results.
Yeah, you can share the results, and I don't know if there's really a winner in this, but everyone agreed that hiking was a great opportunity there. And so the let's see, I gotta get out of this somehow. Hang on. Okay, correct answer, all of the above. Well, except maybe that last one. I kind of threw in the video gaming just to see if anyone was paying attention. So actually, pretty much everything on that list is something that the area is known for. Certainly hiking, but also, backpacking and horseback riding, paddling. There is some whitewater down there for those who didn't check that one. Mountain biking. So pretty much everything that was on that list is down there. So pretty cool area. So some of the basics, located in southern Kentucky, northern Tennessee. It actually crosses the state line. There's a couple of trails there where you can stand in two states at once. It has both established campgrounds, and by established campgrounds, I mean everything from RVs to, running water and showers, that sort of thing, as well as backcountry camping opportunities. Several visitor centers that have exhibits, facilities, rangers programs. So, it's got a lot of that going on. There is no daily entrance fee. There is obviously campsite fees, and then there's a backcountry permit required, and there's a permit fee there. So, and you can get those permits online, or you can stop by the visitor center. The nearest towns are Stearns, Kentucky, and Oneida, Tennessee, if you want to check out the weather or something like that. Whoops. Okay. So these are a few of our favorite backpacking trips and kind of where they fall in the park. There are literally dozens and dozens of hiking and backpacking opportunities down there. So we've just picked a few that are beginner to intermediate that we really have enjoyed. So we'll talk about each one of these. There's the Sawmill Trailhead to Twin Arches Loop, Burnt Mills Bridge to Honey Creek Loop to the Leatherwood Ford, Bandy Creek Creek Campground, which is a full service campground to Grand Gap Loop, and Alum Ford Campground to the Princess Falls and Yahoo Falls. It's one of the northern areas to explore. So we're going to talk about each one of those. So this first one is the Sawmill Trailhead to the Twin Arches Loop. And hopefully you can see my cursor here. But it's basically this trail here, Slave Falls Trail up to this loop. So it's kind of a lollipop hike, although there's some different ways to configure this as well. The way we run it, it's about a little under 13 miles. We usually start, see if I can get my cursor back here. Oops. Well, I can't, oh, there it is. We usually start here at Sawmill Trailhead, but you can start here at Middle Creek, and there's this whole other loop here, Middle Creek Loop, that you can use to lengthen the hike if you want to. That's about 3.5 miles there. And then you can basically hike out here. The campsite that's a great base camp kind of place is called Jake's Place. It's actually the site of an old homestead, and there's some ruins there of the foundation of the homestead. So we like to hike in, base camp, and then do this Twin Arches loop as a day hike, and that's a little under 5 miles. So some of the highlights of this hike are Slave Falls, pass along the way, the Needle Arch, Twin Arches, and the Charrett Creek Lodge. So some pictures of the Slave Falls and Needles Arch. So this is very typical of the topography of this area, you know, a lot of rocks and sort of thing. So nice little falls. And this is one of the smaller arches, Needle, fairly narrow arch. You can see a fairly small one too, based on that picture. This is Jake's Place, which is a backcountry campsite, and it's a fairly large area with plenty of water in the area. So it's at the confluence of a couple of streams. So it's a great place. It's a great destination place because there's several different campsites, if you will, fire circles kind of scattered throughout this. So there's a pretty good chance that you'll find some place there. Although it is very popular with youth groups. So for example, we occasionally take beginning Girl Scout groups out there because it's a nice beginner's trip, and this is a good destination that you can generally find some good campsites. So Charrett Creek Lodge is just an interesting place, and it's a nice kind of stopover the day. They sell some snacks there, like you can see on that board there. So it's a nice place, again, particularly if you're with youth, but really anyone, to just kind of stop there and get a candy bar or a soda or something. It used to be that you could actually go there for a meal. Like, it's a fairly short hike from Jake's Place. So we used to hike in there and have breakfast. Under the current management, you have to actually be staying at Charrett Creek Lodge to actually eat there. But maybe they'll change that policy at some point. So it's probably worth checking back. But it's kind of a cool place. It's just a destination for a lot of horseback riders. So there's usually some horseback riders around there. And they usually have a couple of friendly dogs there too. So it's just kind of a nice resting point kind of along the way. These are the Twin Arches. I mean, these are truly colossal mammoth arches, as you can see from that one picture on the right, when you see how tiny the people are. And there's two of them, and it's you can spend a good hour just hiking around under the arches, on top of the arches. There's a network of little trails all around these arches. In fact, you can kind of get almost lost and lose the main trail, so you have to kind of keep an eye on that. But you can spend a lot of time there just hiking around and bouldering and kind of climbing around. We'll often stop here for lunch and just spend an hour or so. There's a staircase and a trail that takes you to the top of one of the arches. So these pictures you can see is kind of a picture from the bottom, and then the big picture on the left is a view from the top of one of those arches down into the river valley. So again, pretty cool. Okay. Again, if you have any questions along the way, feel free to just toss them into the chat, and we'll find a good stopping point. We'll answer any of them, or just hang out, and at the end we'll unmute and people can ask any questions they want. So the next trip we're going to look at is this Burnt Mills Bridge, which is trailhead, up to what's called the Honey Creek Loop, and then on up to Leatherwood Ford. So this is a point-to-point trip, although you certainly could configure it as a lollipop kind of trip from either end. So you could start at Burnt Mills, go up, do the loop, Honey Creek, and go back to Burnt Mill, or you could come from Leatherwood Ford south to the loop and then back up. We usually do it as a point-to-point hike. So we'll spot a car at Leatherwood and usually start down at Burnt Mill. This is a little more strenuous one. This is probably more of an intermediate, at least kind of hike. There's some pretty rough trails, particularly Honey Creek Loop has some pretty rough sections. The section connecting the trail, connecting Honey Creek to back to the John Muir and up to Leatherwood Ford is fairly new, and it actually doesn't appear on many of the maps, like Trails Illustrated maps. You can actually see that I drew it in there on this map. So if you get a map and it doesn't show that trail, rest assured that trail does actually exist. The connection points on this map are in fact correct, but obviously the route of the trail is not. I'm sure it's more twisty and turny than I show it here. There's a really nice campsite that's on the river, off the Honey Creek Loop, but on the actual river. That's usually our destination. And the highlights are the Honey Creek Loop itself, which is just a cool natural configuration with some nice hiking. There's a place called Devil's Den, which is basically just a big rock house, but it's kind of cool. It's almost a perfect dome-shaped rock house. And there's an old railroad bridge, O&W bridge, that you'll cross at one point. It's kind of cool. So these are some pictures of the Honey Creek Loop itself. As you can see, it can be pretty rugged, pretty tight spots to kind of get through, but it's a beautiful, beautiful spot. Oh, well worth the hike. This most of these pictures looks like we're taken in winter because I see icicles, but it would be fun any time of the year. This is the Oneida and Western Bridge, the O&W bridge that I mentioned. That's still there, just used as part of the hiking trail now. So kind of cool. And that campsite I was talking about, that's off the Honey Creek Loop, but also sitting right on the river. This is a view from it, so you're kind of looking down the Big South Fork from that campsite. It's a nice spot. Nice destination. Okay. Go on to our next one. So this trip is from Bandy Creek Campground to the Grand Gap Loop. It's about 16.5 miles. So this one is kind of nice because it does start in the campground. So there are occasions, depending on what our timeline looks like, where we're going to be arriving late down there, and so particularly again with youth groups. It's kind of nice to be able to go into an established campground the first night if you're arriving just before dark or late in the evening, because you can make a reservation there, obviously, and you have shower houses and things like that. So we'll sometimes do that, stay a night there before we head out, or we'll hike up the trail a bit, and you can see there's a couple of campsite indications there along the trail. If I can get my there we these are nice moderate-sized campsites that are right on this creek here, and so sometimes we'll hike in the Linton farm, this half of the loop, up to those sites and spend the first night, or base camp there actually. Okay, and from there, we'll usually day hike the Grand Gap Loop, which is, over there. And the Grand Gap Loop is about 6.8 miles. It's up on the top of the plateau there, and has some great overlook views. There is no water up there. There are a couple of campsites, so one of our options that we sometimes do is we will camp on top. We'll usually return via the northern part of that loop, that John Linton Farm loop, just so we can go past the John Linton Farm, which is kind of a cool stopping place, and then back to the campground. So the highlights are the John Linton Farm, nice kind of historic place, and the Angel Falls Overlook, which is one of the prime overlooks from up on top. A couple of pictures of the John Linton Farm. Again, this is one of those places that they evacuated when they turned this into a park, but it's a beautiful location. I can just imagine living there and waking up every morning and looking out over that beautiful valley that's kind of in front of this farm. It's just a gorgeous spot. Grand Gap Loop itself, again, it follows the ridge line along the river there. It's a great hike, and lots of different scenic overlooks there, including Angel Falls Overlook, which is one of the destination spots. It overlooks, predictably, Angel Falls, which is actually just a set of rapids down in the river below. Apparently, it was once a much more noticeable set of rapids, but at some point, some local folks decided that they would help the river, and they actually dynamited the rapids. So it became just kind of a series of rapids. Not as dramatic, I guess, as it once was, but the overlook is still gorgeous. When we do camp up top in one of those campsites, it's really nice to take a night hike, go out under the stars and hike out to this overlook. You get a nice starry night and a full moon or partial moon where you have enough light to turn off your headlamps and just enjoy the night. It's a gorgeous spot. Okay. Next on the agenda, Alum Ford Campground to Princess Falls to Yahoo Falls. So this is kind of in the northern part of the park, so it's up in Kentucky. And when you drive down there, you'll actually pass the entrance to this area before you get down to the Bandy Creek area that we just were talking about. It's another great beginner's hike. Love to take, again, youth groups, but any beginner group, this is a great hike. You can start out at this Alum Ford Campground. It's a primitive campground, so there's campsites you can reserve there, and there's I think pit toilets, but there's no shower houses, there's no RVs, that kind of stuff. But again, if you're arriving late, it's a nice option to be able to just quickly set up there and spend your first night there. Or you can hike 3 miles south. You can see along the Sheltowee Trace Trail there. We like to go all the way down to that second campsite down at the confluence of Negro Creek. There's a nice big campsite there that's plenty of space for lots of tents, one of our favorite spots. Along the way at about 2 miles, you will pass a small shelter with a couple of campsites around it, but it doesn't hold as many people. It's not quite as nice a spot. So if you're willing to do the extra mile, get to that nicer campsite. Usually, again, we'll base camp there. You don't have to. You can keep going a second night, and you can go up to Princess Falls there, where there's another beautiful campsite up at the top of the falls. But we'll usually base camp at that Negro Creek site, and then we'll day hike up to Princess Falls, and then from there up to the Lick Creek Falls, and then back to our base camp. And then on the way out, we'll usually take that Negro Creek Trail up to Yahoo Arch and Yahoo Falls, and then finally come back to our cars at Olive Ford. You could flip the whole thing, right? If you wanted to come in and do Yahoo Falls, Yahoo Arch, up to the campsite at Negro Creek, you could do that and then hike out on Sheltowee Trace when you leave. That would be a nice trip too. Okay, Princess Falls, beautiful set of falls. The one picture at the bottom there, those falls are actually frozen, so it makes kind of a cool winter trip if you can catch it when they're frozen. You can actually walk behind those frozen falls, which is pretty neat. And actually the whole pond there was frozen as well. But any time of the year, it's a very pretty sight. And like I said, there is another campsite that's at the top of those falls. Not a huge site, but if you do want to do a backpack a second night and camp somewhere different, that's a nice spot. Okay. On the left here, there's Yahoo Arch, which is kind of it's like a rock house that kind of lost part of its roof, more than an arch. When you're up top, you really don't realize there's an arch there. It's not until you get kind of underneath it where those people are that you can actually even tell you're in an arch. And then the two pictures on the right are both Yahoo Falls, very tall, pretty falls. A lot of people visit this one because it's right near a parking area. So you do get a lot of day hikers down there. The middle picture, as you might guess, is also taken in the winter with that giant cone of ice forming at the bottom of the falls. So if you are into winter camping or hiking, it can be pretty interesting, a little different. Okay. So those are our 4 backpacking trips that, and actually before we get into this one, because we're going to do a bonus discussion of a couple of other trips, a paddling trip and a biking trip. But let me stop sharing here for a second. Becky, did we get any questions or anything in the chat?
No, I don't see any.
Okay. All right. If anything occurs to you, just throw it in there. I will go back to sharing.
Oh, there's a question.
Okay. Yeah.
It says, are horses restricted for horses?
I assume you mean trails. So yeah, the trails are, in fact, there's a variety of trails. So there are equestrian only trails. There are hiking only trails. There are some multi-purpose trails that include both hiking and biking. And maybe some that are all 3, hiking, biking, and horses. But for the most part, the equestrian trails are kind of their own thing. So I have never seen actually horseback riders out on one of the trails we've been hiking, except at Cherry Creek Lodge, which I mentioned before, because that's sort of a equestrian destination. So some of the horse trails actually pass through Cherry Creek. And I've also seen them from the river on paddling trips when they're fording the river. But those are the only times I've actually seen horses on the trail. So unlike some places where kind of the horse and hiking is kind of intermixed, and it can be pretty annoying because horses obviously really tend to dig up trails. So sometimes you feel like you're hiking in a trench when you're hiking on a horse trail. I don't really see that at Big South Fork. I hope that answered the question.
There's another question. What's the likelihood of hiking out to a campsite and not having anything available?
Okay, so for some of these sites that are, relatively modest size, that is a possibility. For example, if you really wanted to stay up on top of that Grand Gap loop that we talked about with the Angel Falls Overlook, there's basically only 2 campsites up there, and it's very possible that they would both be full. So you really should have a backup plan. I tried to pick, for the most part, some sites where they're fairly large and it's less likely for that to happen. For example, Jake's Place, where there's multiple sites within the area, and up on the Yahoo Falls at that Negro Creek campsite. So, like any place, there's a possibility that you're going to hike in there and find that, somebody's already camping there. But I tried to give ones that I think, at least in the fall, winter, and spring seasons, we've never really had a problem camping there. Summer, we don't do a lot of trips down there in the summer because the heat and the bugs. I will say that one time we did go in the summer and the chiggers were absolutely horrendous. So I tend to stay away from it in the real warm months, buggy months. But of course, you get a lot more people down there too in the summer months. So it's possible that that some of those sites would be more popular and taken. I hope that answered the question there. Okay. Anything else, Becky? Or
Nope, that's it for now.
that's it? Okay. Let me jump back in here if I can figure out where we were. I think that was it. Okay, so I know that this was kind of advertised as just talking about backpacking, but like we said earlier, there's really a lot of different opportunities down there, and paddling is one of them, canoeing or kayaking. This section we're talking about is just one of several sections down there, and we haven't done this a lot, but it is a great trip. So it's the section that I'm talking about here is from Leatherwood Ford north up to the Blue Heron. Blue Heron is actually an old mining site, and it's kind of cool and actually just visit in its own right from a historic standpoint. It's still got a bunch of the old building and equipment and stuff, and there's a ranger just visitor center there. So that's kind of cool. But anyway, this trip is 27 miles from Leatherwood Ford up to Blue Heron. Usually 2 to 3 day hike, maybe a 2-night, 3-day, not hike, paddle. There are class 1 or 2 rapids along the way. And there's two portages. So Angel Falls, you go past Angel Falls pretty quick, actually, north of Leatherwood, and you have to portage that one river right. And as far as I know, you really can't run that. I think you have to portage it. It's not a particularly long portage. And then further up, right before Blue Heron, you're going to come to something called Devil's Jump. And you portage that river left, although some people do run it. It's a class 3 or 4, so it's not a trivial rapid, but some people do run it. In fact, some of our friends have run it. I never have. It's free flowing. And so what that means is that nobody's releasing water into the system. So it's all just based on rainfall and spring fed and all that kind of stuff. So that the river levels change dramatically. It can be below 100 CSF and it can go up to 1500 CSF. If it's below 100, you're going to be really frustrated because you're going to be dragging your boat across sand and gravel for most of the trip. And if it's at 1500, it could be dangerous because you're going to be moving along at a pretty rapid clip with a whole lot of water. So the sweet spot is probably that 100 to 500, but it is something that you kind of have to check right before you go and check the weather because if you just had a big rain or you got rain coming or whatever, it's going to change quickly. So we've had trips where we've scheduled it, but the river levels just weren't right and we've had to cancel at the last minute. It can be a little difficult to find campsites. The view from the river is beautiful because you're looking up at these big bluffs. But you're also looking at a basically just overgrown wooded bank that really hard to tell if and where those campsites are. So there is a section there where I've marked that second campsite where it's actually along a trail. And that's a good target area to find a campsite. But again, from the river, it's going to be kind of hard to spot it. So if you do have the opportunity to do some hiking in the area before you paddle it, scouting that shore and finding some landmarks for the campsites probably helps. That one at Station Camp, that's a fairly obvious one. And then the one way up north that I have indicated right before Blue Heron, that was actually just a sandy bank that we ended up camping on for that night. And really, just the scenery, the bluffs are beautiful. There's fishing there. I'm not a big fisherman personally, but some of our group do fish while we had it down there. So as you can see, this is kind of the view from the river on the left there. So you're down low, kind of looking up at these really pretty bluffs, and that's pretty typical of most of the river, and as well as the upper right picture there. The middle picture, of course, is Devil's Jump. Runnable, but probably portage if you're not super comfortable. And last but not least, I'll talk a little bit about some biking opportunities. And this is just something that we've just recently done. I personally do a lot of road biking, not a lot of mountain biking. So this was kind of a cool experience for me. And what I really liked about it was just the variety of types of opportunities that are out there, because you have everything from gravel roads to single track trails. And even those single tracks are, some of them are pretty easy and some of them are pretty challenging. Our first day out there, we did some of the gravel roads and went around and checked out some of the historic sites like the Blevin Farm and the Linton Farm, which are all accessible from some gravel roads. So that was kind of fun. And then we did this Collier Ridge Loop, this 5.8 mile single track. And that was pretty forgiving and pretty, I would say a beginner kind of trail, but beautiful through the woods, but just nice. When we did this Duncan Hollow Road to the John Muir Trail up the northern part of this, see again if I can get my cursor back. So it's Duncan Hollow Road here up to the John Muir Trail, which follows the bluffs down here. The first part of that was, again, pretty forgiving, pretty easy, but it pretty quickly got into some roots and rocks and actual staircases at times, a lot of fallen trees. So it got pretty challenging and kind of kicked my butt, frankly, but it was a great time and it's a great trail. And So it's nice that there's this combination. You could spend the entire trip just doing these gravel roads to some of these historic sites, and or you can do some of these single track trails and just get some beautiful views from overlooks and that sort of thing. That John Muir did lead up to the Grand Gap Loop, which actually is a multi-use trail, so biking is allowed on it. There are some pretty hairy areas where it goes really close to the edge that personally I would probably walk my bike, but I'm sure some of you would be very comfortable biking it. And just a few pictures here. So the one on the upper left, that's your typical gravel road. And again, it's beautiful countryside. You're getting out to some interesting historic kind of old farmsteads, that kind of stuff. So very pleasant, and just that in itself could be a great trip. Over on the right, you see some of the single track through some of the more rocky terrain, and actually the trail here it was a pretty nice section. There were sections where it was a lot rougher and a lot rockier, but still a great trip. I would definitely recommend that. And then you can see some of the views from up top there, again, looking down into the river valley, just beautiful. So definitely recommend paddling and biking as well for the area. Okay. A couple of resources to check out. So if you need to make a reservation, get a permit, whatever, the National Park Service controls all this. So that's their link. I like it. Well, all the maps you see now, this were the National Geographic Trails Illustrated maps, which I think are pretty good for that area. And that's the link for that. The guidebook that I like and that I use is called 100 Trails at Big South Fork. And you can get that on Amazon or a whole bunch of different places. This picture is a view from under one of the twin arches, if you're curious. Okay, we're going to launch another poll here just to kind of get some feedback on how we did. Or if you prefer, if you just want to throw something in the chat as to what you thought of this, was it useful, was it helpful, were we missing something? And in a minute here, we'll open it up and we'll answer any other questions that may be lingering out there. So while you're answering this, just a reminder that this pitch will be out on the Sierra Club website, as well as eventually a link to the presentation, the video itself, out there in a few days. As far as these virtual presentations, we're going to take the month of July off and then restart again in August. So look for another announcement of some of our virtual outings here in August. And like I said, we're hoping that we'll start seeing some actual in-person outings out there on Meetup soon, that you can join us. So, okay. Okay, and again, if you have any specific feedback, feel free to just throw it in the chat. Did we get any more questions, Becky, in the chat?
Yes. One person asked, how do we connect with you to guide and teach beginners?
Well, if you just want to join one of our outings, then keep an eye on our Meetup site. And actually, I think the link to that is coming up here soon. And join one of our trips. If you've actually got a group that you're looking for somebody to, help you plan a trip or even take you out on a trip, then I'll throw my email in the chat, and feel free to just reach out to me. I do it, and others in our group do it too, for like youth groups and things. But hey, if you've got a group that wants to come out, plan something special, I don't know why we wouldn't do that, but really, for most people, just join us on one of our trips on Meetup.
They do the backpack school still? Are we going to be doing that?
That's a great question. We hope to. The real question is, will we do it in fall or in spring or in both?
Mm.
So we're still trying to figure out if we have enough bandwidth to do it this fall. My guess is that it's probably going to be in the spring that we'll have the next backpack school. Yep. Yep.
Someone made the comment that half of the Burnt Mill Bridge washed away 4 months ago when the 50-year flood came and the water was to the top of the Leatherwood Ford gazebo.
Really?
Mm.
Interesting. Huh. Okay. I appreciate that that feedback. And let's. Okay, so here's a few links here that if you are interested in becoming a Sierra Club member or making a donation, if you enjoy what we're doing, then those are some links. Definitely join our meetup, because that's the primary way that you're going to learn about what we're doing, what we're offering. So definitely do that. If you'd like to become a volunteer in Sierra Club, and it's not just about outings, obviously, you know, we have service projects and lots of other things going on. Help out with our environmental advocacy, political screening, legislative action, conservation efforts, got a lot going on. So if you're interested in any of that, go out to our website, miamigroup.org, and volunteer. This picture, if you're interested, it happens to be a winter picture, obviously, from behind Princess Falls. So this is standing behind Princess Falls taking a picture. Okay. And for those of you who are experienced in the outdoors, we really would love to have you join us to become an outings leader. And I know a couple of the folks on the call have already done that, or at least we're hoping they'll do that. And we appreciate that and welcome them. We have a great time. It's a great way to make some new friends, enjoy some camaraderie. So definitely, if you're an experienced outdoors person who just wants to kind of take it to the next level, please feel free to reach out, and we would love to have you join us as an outings leader. We put these presentations together with some partners of ours, Roads, Rivers, and Trails, which many of you may know is an outfitter based in Milford, independently owned. Great source of expertise. If you have any questions about trips, or particularly about gear, clothing, whatever, in my experience, these people really know what they're talking about, and they've been a big help with us in putting together these presentations. And then there's Summit Trek and Trail that plans a lot of outdoor kinds of adventures, and Nancy Ball is the head of that. She helps us out all the time. And then, of course, there's the Miami Group Sierra Club. So we're happy to be here. So with that, I think I'm going to stop sharing, and we're going to allow people to unmute if they so wish. And so you're live. If anyone wants to shout out a question, or did we get any more in the chat? I see one that says you guys never post any hikes, and that's actually a pretty fair question or comment. Certainly, if we haven't for the last year and a half, I don't know, since the pandemic, because we were actually forbidden from doing that by Sierra Club National. And I say that in a negative way, and I don't mean it in a negative way, because obviously their concern first and foremost is safety of members and safety of our participants. So it was the right thing to do. But even before that, we have been haven't had a lot of hikes. We're hoping to ramp that up. We have some new leaders that have joined in. So we're hoping when we come back from the pandemic here that you will see both more hikes and more paddle sports. I didn't see that in the comment here, but we've actually been very light on paddle sports too. So we're hoping to get a lot more of those posted. So keep your eyes open. And again, if you'd like to be a leader and lead some hikes, we'd love to have you. Anything else show up in the chat? A few thank yous here.
Yeah, some thank yous, people that
Okay.
can't wait.
Yeah, okay.
Good. I put something in the chat, but I guess I just wanted to give you feedback that on this presentation and the one you did for Panther Town, I've not been able to see you using your cursor on the maps that we've been looking at. So
Okay.
that's happened both presentations. So I'm just kind of looking at the map and
Ah.
kind of saying, okay, well, maybe I'll figure out later what he's talking about.
Well, thank you for that feedback. You know, I didn't realize that. It's visible to me, so I just naively assumed it was visible to everyone else. I'm guessing there's some kind of zoom feature that allows me to actually draw on a map or something. I'll have to figure that out. But thanks, Frank. I appreciate that feedback.
Barry?
Yeah.
We saw the cursor, but
Oh,
I wanted to make a comment on the Chateau Trace. You mentioned that trail which comes through the park.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of history with that trail, you know, where there was the slave route, where they brought slaves up from the south.
I didn't know that. I
You
didn't
did
know
not
that.
know that.
I did not know that. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Do you have any other tidbits like that?
No, not offhand. Just that popped into my mind because it was a very popular route.
So it was part of the Underground Railroad. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
Wow.
And I think it ended up around Red River Gorge.
Yeah. Well, it definitely, you know, Chateau Trace goes up through Red River Gorge. So
right. I don't know where the northern terminus is, but
yeah,
I'm not sure about the southern where it started, but that was the route that they smuggled slaves up through from the south.
It would be pretty cool to research that, because obviously it would have had to gone up at least into Ohio, right? Because that was the first free state north.
Right. I think so.
Yeah. So, but that would be pretty cool, and how timely with Juneteenth coming up here in a few days. So.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. I've never hiked the whole Sheltoe end to end. I have a friend, Neil, that did it recently. So apparently it's a pretty nice hike. Although he did say that by far the nicest section was in Big South Fork and in Red River Gorge, because it goes right through the middle of the gorge as well. So he basically said those were the two best sections. And there's a fair amount of road walking and that sort of thing, but still
pretty cool.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
Right. No, it's always, well, especially the way things are now, you know, somebody ought to do a little story on that to show the other side of the coin of what's going on and what's happened in the past. I mean, that was one of the better things in the past that was did, you know, towards the blacks.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, you know, you got to give credit where credit's due.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's, you know, certainly fascinating history, and we're all learning, I think, a little bit more about it. So thanks for sharing that. I'm putting a couple of things in the chat here. One is my email. Somebody had asked about, you know, outings and things. And then I'm going to put the Miami group website link in there as well. Okay. All right, Joanne. All right, I'll capture that, Joanne. Okay. Any other thoughts, comments, questions? Well, we are pretty much at our time. So really want to thank everyone who was able to join us tonight, and thank Becky for jumping in at the last minute to be the right-hand person. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your evening, and look forward to seeing you out on the trail. Bye-bye.